Please join me in welcoming our new CEO.
Thank you. Hey. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, for the invitation. And thank you, David and everyone, because you see, Mark, we listened to you. As we were having that moment of panic, we took a pause. We took a pause. That slide, it represents a phrase from a late mother. What does not kill you make you stronger? What does not kill you make you stronger? This is a phrase she used to tell me and my younger sister again and again and again. Whenever we were complaining, whenever we said something was unfair, whenever it was her way to push on us resiliency. You're going to go through that. You're going to get better at the end. And so, what did I do when I had my two sons? I did the same thing. What does not kill you make you stronger? I was using the phrase from Nietzsche, right? And when they got to visit my late mother, she used to tell the same thing. So my sons was like, oh, it runs in the family. That is not crazy. It's all of us being crazy. And it was all well said until May 2019. You see, there was a moment there. May 2019, my older son graduated. Salutatorian, he's going to, he went admitted to college. I should have been a really proud dad. And as he was giving a speech as a salutatorian, all I could feel were two feelings. Part of me was a sense of relief. Thank goodness we're done with high school. He's graduating. And he's okay. Because there was then that guilt. As I was seeing my son on the stage, all I could see was the damage of the resilience he had caused. He had pushed through. He was a salutatorian, but I could see the physical and the mental scars. I was feeling guilt. And this is when I realized that phrase from my late mother, I had took it literally. I had pushed on my kids' resiliency, but I had completely forgotten the other part that my late mother was doing in practice, which was combining resiliency with mindfulness. And so let's have a discussion about, well, how can we think about cultivating resilience and mindfulness in IT? So the current state. Many of us, this is at least how I feel many days, and maybe you all, right? Is we're feeling in that state of a digital storm where email after email, crisis after crisis, we're feeling like we are in a tumultuous sea and we're facing wave after wave after wave. And so what we're doing, we're going into that firefighting. We're going into that raw survival. A wave takes us down, we're going under the sea, we're coming up, we're grasping, and we're moving to the next one, and it's constant. And what it does, when we're approaching resiliency in that self-overcoming, in that survival moment, we are falling into what we can call the Nietzschean trap, where we are accumulating the scars of one battle or another. Yes, IT sometimes, that what does not kill you make you stronger, we are going to overcome. That becomes that unofficial motto of IT, right? One crisis after another, an outage after another. But when we're approaching it from a raw resiliency survival mode, yes, we have heroes. We are celebrating heroes. We are sending these emails. but what we're not recognizing in the accumulation of scar tissue. In a way, that's not healthy. It takes a toll on us. It takes a toll on our teams. What we're dealing with what we're not seeing is a hidden cost of the resiliency of that survival. It's a burnout. It's a burnout of us as a leader, but also the burnout on the team. Yes, we are coming, we are prevailing, we are fixing something. We are doing it at the cost of doing, maybe a quick fix. But because we are stressed, because we are, that moment of rush, we are also creating technical debt. And in the end, what we're doing when we are approaching resiliency in that raw way, we are creating fragility. Fragility at the human level, but also fragility at the technical level, fragility as a system. Let's reflect on what we learned today throughout the session, whether it be the, teaching from Mark with taking a pause, having a different approach to mindfulness, or what Ken told us with the relationship, the flywheel, the trust. Let's talk about how we can take a different path. And of course, why don't we go from Nietzsche to Voltaire, a French philosopher, a provocateur. French are not provocateur, I assure you. Some of you may have PTSD of reading the novel Candide. Candide is a satire where you have, the principal protagonist, Candide, going through the world and trying to make sense of the chaos. He tries to look for this, deep meaning, making sense, but in the end, we end up with just a simple realizations, which is, il faut cultiver notre jardin. In the end, Candide talks about we must cultivate our garden. Many people have different opinion of what cultivate our garden means, but maybe let's try to take it through the lens of IT. So how do we apply the principle of Voltaire, cultivating a garden, from cultivating resiliency and mindfulness in IT? Well, let's see. Let's talk about resilience. If we compare and contrast Nietzsche with Voltaire, Nietzsche is that armor fati, is a fate. We are really having that, like I was talking about, that raw, approach to resiliency. We are facing adversity. We will become better. We will overcome, right? We will build that armor of resiliency, that strengthening. It's very reactive. It's very, it's like you are hammering the resiliency. Versus when you take the different approach from Voltaire, when you think in terms of cultivate, and Ken, I'm going to reference what you say, right? You now don't have that restrictive mindset, that fixed mindset from Nietzsche. Now you have a growth mindset with like Voltaire, where now we can think about how do we actually think in terms of acknowledging the chaos, but using it in a productive way. Just that shift in mindset. So crisis is an opportunity not just to grow in a very raw, right, way, but it's how do we actually make progress? How do we cultivate something better? Mindfulness. If we don't pay attention, when we think about resiliency, when we try to develop our own resilience, it's a very, we are alone, right? We tend to overcome or want to overcome the challenge alone. We stand on top of the mountain. We are facing the wave alone. Well, when you think now about that cultivate, if you go back to what, Ken, you told us earlier, we cultivate the relationships. Now we don't have to face the crisis alone because we have cultivated a relationship, we have cultivated a team. And now we have that mindfulness at a team level to address and approach the crisis. By now you're like, okay, we talk about Nietzsche, we talked about Voltaire, we talked about garden, we are completely lost. What is that concept of a garden when you talk about IT? What do we cultivate? Well, let's talk about cultivating the team. That's what is the most important, the people, us. How do we cultivating a team as people leader? But it's not just cultivating the people, it's also the stack. Our technology stack, right? If we think about that cultivation mindset, what are the weeds in the garden? What are we supposed to pull out? How do we prune so we have better performance? And when you have a garden, you also have a soul. What is a soul in an IT garden? We talk a lot about the cultures, that trust, that norms, the relationship. What do we need to do to keep growing it? Let's talk about weeding before planting. When you look at the gardens, you have all kinds of weeds. How are you going to plant if you are full of weeds? How do we approach that? Well, what is weeding in IT? Well, how do we remove what stifles us? These are some examples. You don't have to agree with it. The intent is for us to have the discussion. Legacy systems, zombie project, and I can tell some of you are thinking, you're the CIO, we're going to have a list for you, things we needed to stop doing, or we're going to come to you for prioritization. That's fair. But let's think a bit deeper. What about eliminating the toxic, all is for the best, right? You have, if I remember his name, the character Pangloss, who is the eternal, ever optimist. So if we apply that to our world, ignoring what is happening, thinking, oh, all is for the best, there is no problem. We don't have any, issues from a cultural point of view that we have to address. Are we truly cultivating? Is it okay to accept and just ignoring the challenges and just plowing through one crisis after another? What about hype cycles? AI today, tomorrow, extended reality, the day after, humanoid robots. They're all going to happen, but how do we approach that in a mindful way versus trying to chase the next hype? Planting. I'm not going to pretend I have a green thumb, but as leader, if we want to cultivate mindfulness and resilience in IT, what do we want to plant? Well, it's not just relationships, it's how do we plant the seeds for the next generation of leaders? What is our responsibility? How do we protect spaces for people to actually address issues, to do that continuous improvement we all talk about? How about we plant well-being? How are we going to live the day, look at what is our own personal garden, or the garden that we are responsible to cultivate, our teams, organizations, and how we're going to approach building resilient, mindful teams, not teams that are just trained to go one crisis after another. How are we going to have that psychological safety? Ken, thank you so much again for making this examples, but that was so true. You example of the Microsoft M365. Cultivating this relationship, creating the psychological safety. How we're approaching the small relationship building in our own teams so that when there is a crisis, when there is an issue, people are feeling safe to speak up. That's what cultivating means. In a room with so many IT people, technologists, former technologists, could not have gone away without a chart to compare and contrast. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is for you to take and think about. That raw survival from Nietzsche, that self-overcoming, that, we appear as leaders to inspire, that we will prevail, we will go through the crisis. I don't think this is what we want. If we are going to cultivate, if our goal is to have resiliency and mindfulness and having people flourishing, we want to really have teams thriving through steady guidance, one step at a time, not big declarations. When you cultivate a garden, it is a commitment and you show up every day. Because if you don't attend your garden, you come back a week after, you have a problem. You have weeds. You need to spend more time attending. You need to water. So think about it. This is where having the discussion, you thinking about it, how do you define a mindful leader? What does it mean for us to be a mindful leader? I don't have the answer because all of us are still evolving on that journey. But maybe whether you think about yourself as a servant leader or a quiet leader, it is about showing up and having intentional, everyday interactions, everyday investment in the people, in the process. It's about creating that environment where people are going to thrive. So I would invite you to take what you've learned today, what resonates with you, and ask yourself, what is it I'm going to take and put in actions to be a mindful leader that is going to be truly focused on cultivating that resiliency and that mindfulness? Not big action, small actions. And actually, I think it was Adam Famanik, the Do It HR director, that reminded me recently about an article from Dr. Brené Brown, which is, we talk a lot about trust, but trust is you fill a jar of marble, one marble at a time. How are you doing regular daily check-in on the people that work for you? How are you checking yourself every day? Whether you put in practice what Mark taught us, whether you do journaling, it is a daily actions. So, how do you see cultivating your IT garden?